everybody, and welcome again to Rise Together. My name is Amy Thiessen, and today I am going to have a wonderful conversation with psychologist Shari Derksen. Shari is a psychologist and sexologist here in Calgary, Alberta, working primarily with couples and individuals around relationships, intimacy, and sexual expression. So I'm very excited to have her here, especially as we chat about all the things that happen around Valentine's Day and have a bit of a conversation about that. So I'd love to begin because I don't think I'm going to be the only person that is curious what a sexologist is. Shari, if you wouldn't mind letting me know, what does that mean? What is a sexologist?
Literally, sexologist means one who studies sex. And I took a little bit of liberty giving myself that title because I do literally study sex because I'm doing a PhD in human sexuality. And that's something that I want to get into is more research and writing with regards to sexuality. That's a title I gave myself.
I love it. A person who studies sex. And when you talk about your studies, because I know we know each other from outside of just doing this, when you go into your studies, is that primarily like through the realm of psychology, or is that also just through personal observation? Is that through alternative communities? Is that, what types of things have you been observing or noticing that have sparked your interest in this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, largely psychology. It's an area that comes up a lot in my work with relationships, of course, and intimacy. It's something that I've had an interest in my own personal life and personal growth with regards to my own sexual expression and, past trauma, that sort of thing. And I tend to gravitate towards conversations and topics that are taboo and things that people don't normally like to talk about. So the things that are messy, awkward, ugly, that sort of thing. So, that's where I think a lot of the interest comes from. And I like to talk about things, that people don't normally talk about. And sex is a big taboo topic. And we don't talk about we're bombarded with sexual messages and, it's on the screen and we should know a lot about sex. But we don't talk about it a lot. And there's a lot of shame around it. So... I want to dig into that and research it and kind of blow things up and talk about the things, all the things.
I have to share a story because I think it's hilarious and I think you'll appreciate it. When I was in grade 11, we were doing health, right? And of course, sex education in our systems is very technical. This is the fallopian tube. This is the vulva. And, all of that stuff nobody talks about, pleasure or communication or understanding. That doesn't exist. But my teacher in grade 11 was like, okay, boys, I want you to pay attention. This is the clitoris. And every girl there was just like...
That's amazing.
She was ahead of her time. She was ahead of her time.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you just said, we have all this bombardment of sexuality and very much a surface level penetration, sexy time, good looking, all those types of things around sex, almost on the spectrum of pornography to some degree. And not to say there isn't beautiful erotica and pornography that can be done really intentionally. Mm-hmm. But I wonder, when you talk to someone, like what are some of the main reasons someone might come to talk to you about intimacy or relationships? What are the things that might be coming up or the challenges that they might be going through?
Mm-hmm. Pornography is a big issue, particularly for men. I do see a lot of men who have developed quite a habit, and they get into this really rigid porn, masturbation, brain, penis, sort of.
That's okay.
Brain connection. There's very little information in pornography about intimacy and what it's like to connect with a real person. And so they find that, they come up against all kinds of issues that develop out of that, not knowing how to connect to someone really. It can lead to erectile dysfunction. A number of issues come related to that. So there's a lot of shame around that. And I would say shame is the biggest thing that I address.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. The pornography one, you know, I've talked to people and stuff with almost you can speak to this, of course. Intimacy requires sensitivity and awareness. And it's like pornography or masturbation or anything that is like more intensity. It begins to almost like numb our capacity. I mean, it's no different in communication or voice, right? If somebody's always like, well, it's like this and blah, 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 and the other person learns how to do the same, nobody's tapping into the nuances of like, I feel insecure, I feel nervous. It's just anger or power. Like it ends up becoming these really two-dimensional spaces instead of this like, I mean, sexuality, voice, any of this stuff is like, there's so much richness there.
Yes.
When you speak of shame, I would hear that that's probably an undercurrent in a lot of the things. So you said men maybe having issues where they become more addicted to pornography or have that kind of overstimulation. What other types of things come up? Why do women maybe see you or couples see you or people in like LGBTQ communities or asexual, you know, all these different kind of ways of relating to sexuality? What other types of things come up for you?
Yeah, I would say low desire is probably one of the next big topics. And that comes up a lot, particularly for women, but for men as well. And I think especially in certain phases of life, like young parenthood, that's an extremely demanding, exhausting time. And when your body and you have all these demands, desire is pretty low at that time. And people develop, there's a number of things that can contribute to low desire. And when that desire is gone, people tend to develop a lot of shame around that. Why is this happening? Why do I not have this desire? And then partners in relation to that also develop shame. Why am I not being desired? Is there something wrong with me? Am I not adequate? And people tend to not talk about it. So yeah, you're having this shame in silence.
Yeah.
And disconnection happens.
Yeah, it sounds like a reinforcement. Like, well, I'm not feeling desire, or then that person, the other person's like, oh, I kind of want something. It's like, but I don't feel desire, and then they feel bad, like they're not desired. But this person feels bad because they don't desire, and they think something's wrong with them, and then and it just keeps doing this. But nobody actually says, hey, stuff's happening. I feel like stuff's happening. Can we have a conversation? It's so interesting. I want to get into that, and I think that, you know, my crew would also be interested of like, how do you have these conversations? But before even going into that, I'm wondering if there's anything that you would think is important to know of, like how maybe common this can be, or the types of things or the reasons why we might feel either disconnected or kind of separated that come up.
Well, something that's coming to my attention in my clinic, and also one of my largest research interest areas, is childhood sexuality, particularly normative sexual behaviors that happen in childhood. And there's a lot of shame that develops around that. And because there's so much shame, well, not shame, there's, I would say, fear in our culture, and all these moral panics with regards to children and sexuality. I mean, even just pairing those two words, children and sexuality, and people go, whoa, what? I mean, the first
kids don't have that, and you're like, actually, developmentally, it's part of it. Yeah.
So, any exploration, particularly that happened with peers of the same sex in childhood, you know, with siblings or cousins or friends or whatever, people don't talk about it. And so children make up these stories about, you know, is this okay? I mean, and, you know, they develop these stories of shame, and they carry that with them until adulthood, until they talk to someone such as myself and share these experiences that they had early on. And for them to hear that that is normal, that is common, I just see this huge relief in the body as people hear that I'm normal. This is normal.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really glad you brought it. I mean, you really took it to the roots.
We're just where it starts.
So, first of all, but it is interesting. I have a lot of friends with younger children, and I remember myself around like quite young was quite sexual and like quite connected to that. And I mean, I know beautiful parents that like their child will be like, I like to rub myself, or I like to play with myself, and they're like, that's amazing, that's your body, it's yours to explore and enjoy. You just want to make sure you do it where you're safe and you're in your own space, because nobody gets to do that you don't want to. And like creating a conversation, whereas I mean, God, I would never have talked to, I mean, I think my mom actually would have handled it like a champ and probably knew more than I realized, like, if we really want to get into that. But I was never given shame around that. I know so many people that, well, no, that's dirty, that's wrong, that's gross.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just a body, and it's actually a really natural, healthy part of childhood development.
And it's all about pleasure in childhood. I mean, they are just experimenting with this body and learning what pleasure is. And of course, there's curiosity. Children learn, and they like to explore or have curiosity about other people, their own bodies, and as well other people's bodies. And yeah, so many times parents are not equipped to manage that, depending on what their childhood experience was, or what their own relationship is to their own body, their own sexuality, if there's any shame there. When they see their child behaving in a sexual way, or enjoying pleasure in their body. And it's part of our culture, again, because there's that fear around children and sexuality. There's the assumption that if a child is being sexual, we kind of superimpose this adult sexuality on it, and see that as, oh, this is something dangerous or inappropriate. And we don't, there's this movement away from, it's just pleasure. It's the body, and how do we give children appropriate information, developmentally appropriate information to have a positive relationship to their body and what they're doing and their exploration. So it starts there. We're getting to the root of what my interest is, for sure.
That's really interesting. And I imagine too, I mean, when you say this, I think of, okay, so pleasure is an activation. But pleasure is an activation when we can actually hold it, is really resourceful for the body. It helps us resolve our tensions, it helps us process information, it can help heal trauma, it can work in all these ways. And yet, when it's almost becomes this compartmentalized thing, I wonder if that even feeds into this necessity for more intensity. Because we don't know how to actually just allow the process of it to happen. I also love these conversations. Let's just talk about sex. So then coming up into adulthood, we have these kind of templates of kids that have maybe been ashamed, or something's happened, or they had something sort of sexual with a family member, friend, like younger of their age group, of a curiosity that was actually quite innocent. And they grow up, and then what are other challenges that are coming up for couples when they come to you? Like, what do these look like as adults? What are some of the challenges that you're seeing?
Well, in relation to those experiences in childhood, generally in our culture, our Western North American culture, we value production. This is part of our capitalistic society. It's what do we do? And there's such an emphasis on production. And that shows up in how we express ourselves sexually as well. Like, how can I produce? We do this thing and we have the outcome of climax. And there can be so much pressure in that. And we forget that, we can just luxuriate in this sensuality and this pleasure. And we devalue pleasure in our production culture. So that's another part of it. So I see shame around pleasure in general, and that will show up particularly for women. I see that a lot. Women are afraid of their own pleasure, and men too. So yeah, in general, and not just sexual pleasure, but really any pleasure. This it's challenging for a lot of people to just allow that. Like, am I allowed to do this? It's not productive. Yeah, it's generally not productive.
Yeah.
And can you value that?
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Get it done. Well, and you bring up an interesting point too, the pleasure and with the getting it done and like climax.
Mm-hmm.
We're also talking with two very different bodies when it's a man and a woman in a sexual relationship.
Mm-hmm.
How long it takes for a man to achieve erection and how long it takes a woman for her vagina to kind of come into a space that's receptive and open. I mean, from what I've heard, it's like a guy can sometimes, not always, but it's a much faster process, whereas a woman, it's not unusual to take 35, 40 minutes to actually prepare the space and to let it be receptive. So I wonder, and I mean, this is more just talking from people I've talked to, and my own thoughts around it is like, if our sexual ideals are based around climax and women naturally take longer and are consistently just going, oh, it's okay.
Yes.
Oh, it's okay. Then now there's this disparity, and unfortunately, it's a disparity on both sides because men have no idea half the time. They don't understand, and when you're learning sex really often from porn and technical training, that's a really, like, a course that's hard to talk about. Like, that's a sticky situation. That is a hard situation.
Yes, pornography and, many things about our culture are very androcentric, so focused on male, the male body. And yeah, it's challenging. Women don't know the roadmap to their own body a lot of the time. So how can they express then to a partner, this is how my body works, and this is what you can do. And there's even shame in that, because there is such a focus on male pleasure, and that gets in the way as well.
It's funny, something that came up with me once in a relationship was this desire for slow and the space and needing that, and them having a different timeline, right? Which is really normal. And what came up for me was like, oh, I'm too much.
Yes.
And that's something I hear all the time with women. I'm too much. I shouldn't take up so much space, or I shouldn't need this, I shouldn't want this. And yet it's not too much, and it's fair that it's uncomfortable and awkward, and that's kind of part of it, because most of us are in such a, and by immature I don't mean like there isn't maturity in the person, but this part, if it hasn't been nurtured, it hasn't been taught, when you were young you were told it was bad, it's still in its infancy of understanding. So when you get into these spaces where you have these disconnects in communication and capacity, what are some of the strategies you work with clients to help them talk about sex and talk about, understand their needs and talk about them? Because I think that first part's a really huge component, because understanding is its own adventure.
Well, I like that phrase that you used earlier. Something's happening right now. Just an expression like that. Oftentimes people get caught up, if they're going to say something vulnerable or say that there's, a difficult emotion or discomfort or whatever. I need to have a good reason for that, or I need to have an excuse for it or an explanation. So they won't say anything until they know, oh, this is why that's happening. So they won't just say, something's happening, I don't know. But if you just allowed yourself just to admit that something's happening and I don't know, like I'm feeling something, I'm sensing something, can we talk about it? And just the talking about it and allowing yourself to have that without the explanation. You don't have to have the explanation. Just say something's happening.
I love that. It's so easy, hey? It's like, oh yeah, that. But something's happening, and I also love even just, something's happening, can we just pause for a second?
Yeah.
And can we just give it a little space?
Can we breathe? Yes.
Can we just come here? And then allow whatever needs to be said or whatever comes up to be said.
Yes.
which might be, I don't have a clue what to say right now.
Yes, and just be with that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so much about presence and what is happening right now in the moment. Yeah, and that's also, again, pornography is not our friend in that sense. There's so much what is going on in the brain, and we got so caught up in fantasy and what am I thinking, that we disconnect from the body. Like, what is happening right now in this moment? What am I sensing? It's not so much about what am I thinking. What am I thinking, gets in the way of what is happening in my body. So when we allow that to, get really present with what is happening, slow down, not have to explain it, just be in that moment of what is happening right now.
And curious.
Curious, yes, curiosity.
I love that. You said something that hits is we get so disconnected from our bodies, and in my work, when I work with voice, so often people are like, how do I speak? And I'm like, oh, we're not there. We're not there. Mm-hmm. If you really want to speak from what's true, it means starting to have some connection with not just what your mind is doing. Is there fear? Is there tension? Is there sensitivity? And the reality of some people I work with, it's 6 months, it's a year before they're even in their body. Mm. And so I imagine when it comes to like sexuality, the beautiful thing, which is similar with voice, is like it can kind of give you a connection to it, but it can also give you a connection to it.
What is that?
Oh dear. Oh my.
Yes.
Yeah.
And acceptance and compassion, self-compassion when you do experience something or notice something in the body, allowing that, accepting it. Yeah.
Do you, like when you're working with couples, are there practices that you have them do either during sex or even prior to sex? And I actually should even default, because when I say sex, most people are probably going to think penetration, and I don't think that's fair, because that's a default for a lot of us. Is sex is penetration, whereas sitting by each other and holding hands could be crazy intimate if you've been disconnected. Yeah, that in itself could cause so much emotion that the idea of having sex is terrifying. So I'm curious, what are some of the ways that you help couples find a space of intimacy? I'll use that word instead of sexual expression. Yes. Sex. Yeah.
Well, something that I really like that comes from the Tantra world, yay, Tantra, is something called Dyads, where you sit across from your partner and just eye gazing, and even just eye gazing can be incredibly intimate and vulnerable, and allowing whatever arises in that. So whatever memories or images or emotions or body sensations, and just being with that in the moment, before you even say anything, just noticing what is arising, and then sharing with one another what you are noticing without the explanation. Not everything has to have an explanation, just I'm noticing this sensation, or this memory is coming to mind, or I'm noticing tears and I don't know why. Yes, tears, sadness do not have to have an explanation. Allow it. These tears are here right now, and I don't know what they mean, and I don't know what it is. Can we talk about it and just be with it? I think that is so uncomfortable for men in particular, so afraid of emotions, and sadness. First of all, their own emotions, but then to witness that in a partner that they care about. Oh, they're getting emotional. What do? I got to do something. I got to fix this. I got to, and there's all this pressure rather than just, I'm just going to be here with these emotions, with these tears, whatever it is. So yeah, that's a big piece of it, is just being present with one another and allowing whatever is happening in the body, or whatever you're feeling, whatever you're sensing.
I love that. I know we talked about this in the program. It's very similar, that like permission, and permission to also not have a clue. Like, yes. I don't feel anything, and I don't understand why we're doing this. Cool. That's actually a completely allowed place. I know I'll work with clients, and sometimes they'll say, I don't know what I should be feeling. Like, nothing. Nothing. Like, if you don't feel anything, then that's what's here.
Yes. It's trusting yourself, trusting your body.
And it doesn't have to look any way.
Yes.
So if a couple, let's say they're deciding, okay, we're going to connect, and we're just starting to do this, and they've become a little bit more disconnected, work, kids, COVID. I feel like a lot of relationships have really gone through a ringer in the last 2 years. And they sit and they gaze. How might you start that? Do they do that for like a minute, 3 minutes, 10 minutes? What would you give a couple that is brand new to this and this is weird to them? Because let's be real, it's probably weird to a lot of people. It's really not weird to me at all. You know, just I think both of us, our studies and where we ended up looking at things probably started many years ago. But when someone's brand new, how do you introduce it to them?
Yeah, well, I encourage creating space for that and being consistent with that. So, you know, if it's once a week, like every Friday evening, we have our time.
I love you. That's my date night.
Yeah, Friday evening is a great time. Sure. But prioritizing that and creating space for that, because oftentimes people also get caught up in, you know, sexual expression needs to be spontaneous, and it only means something if it's, you know, if we plan it, or we have, you know, this is our, you know, connecting night or whatever. It seems to, you know, people have this idea that it takes away from the authenticity of it or whatever. But it's challenging, especially in young parenthood, to make room. So to prioritize that and have this space to connect and get present with one another, and allow whatever happens. So remove the pressure of, we have to, you know, be sexual and it leads to climax. No, that may happen. It's great if that happens, but it doesn't have to happen. It's a time to slow down and be present with one another and just allow whatever happens in that time. But yeah, it's prioritizing that and being consistent. So carving out space for that.
Thank you. I want to ask your thoughts on this because this comes up. So this is something that comes up with many people I've talked with, because obviously communication and sexuality comes up with voice and communication a lot. Is what happens what do you do for clients that, let's say, one part of the couple tends to want to move towards sexuality and the other one's not ready? And so something like even a dyad or something like where you're just holding hands or you decide to just cuddle, there's an instigation from one party and that other party is really in a space where they're not ready to go there. How do you help couples navigate that space when that's happening, when the desire levels are different and that's coming up in those intimate spaces?
Yeah, and this is challenging. And this
none of this is easy, by the way. Like we're giving you stuff, and it's like this is not
problem.
Nailed it.
Yeah, this can be a real test of how empathetic someone can be. Can they slow down and create space for their partner? And this can be really challenging. And this will show up, you know, even without going into sexual expression. This will show up in a relationship. If one of the partners really struggles with empathy and does not attend to their partner, that can blow up. That gets really messy. And then you have one partner questioning, do I even want to be with this person who doesn't seem to have the capacity to attend to me or be empathetic? But yeah, it's really about, again, it's about compassion and being empathetic, allowing yourself to slow down. And attend to what is happening for my partner, and negotiating that, because as one person slows down and can show that they can create space for their partner, that opens up so much trust for the other partner. Then they can open up, it's amazing how often I will see in couples where one partner is the pursuer and they keep kind of coming at the other, and you know the other one is like, this is too much, I'm overwhelmed. And when that person starts to back off and allow space, the other partner comes towards them. There's desire and they initiate something, and so and it's that there's that trust that is built by creating that space. So yeah, it's challenging.
I love it. I mean, yeah. It's just yeah. That's all I have is yeah. So often our attachment or an aversion, I need to fix, I need to make this happen. That's almost the thing that creates the dissonance. Right? You know, being able to say, and there's a lot of mindfulness even in that too, right? If somebody has more of that anxious attachment, I need this, for the other person to say like, I love you. Like, I love you so much and I need space. To like acknowledge that that's what that person, the attachment's coming from a fear. Or the space person being able to say, oh, I love you, I can give you space. That's such, I mean, it's not an easy dance. And I imagine there's a lot of self-work. Well, I know there's a lot of self-work in that. Do you offer that to people? So when they're working together with like these dyads or these discrepancies of desires or empathy, do you ever work with clients like individually as well? Like, so would you see a couple and then see them? Because I find if you're working with two people, this is me, like right there's this person, and then I'm navigating this person, and then I'm navigating what this is. And then like there's 4 of us in the room as opposed to 3. As a, you know, when you have one-on-one, it's a very different thing. So do you work that way, or can that be a helpful thing?
Yeah, sometimes that does arise. I mean, generally when working with couples, the relationship is the unit of treatment. And sometimes in that, one of the partners, something may come up for them that requires more processing or something that they want to go a little deeper into. So I can see them individually for that. Again, my mind is on, this is for the relationship. Right. So I'm focusing on them a little bit more individually. But yeah, it's the relationship that is the unit of treatment.
I love that. But even with that, like as someone's doing that, having supplemental support, right? So
yeah, and
you're working with a couple.
Me.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, we often think, I need to take my partner to therapy. We need to go to therapy. And I work with so many like women particularly, right, that when they're actually able to say stuff and like know what it is they want, need, just that will shift everything.
Yes.
Right? So even working on our own kind of processing is going to be a huge part of that. And then if you can do that together, that's huge. So creating space, giving dedicated time, starting really simple with just being present and practicing and cultivating presence. These are beautiful ways of starting to connect. Now, how do you take that maybe when people are in the bedroom and they like different things? Somebody likes something that's kinkier, somebody likes something that's more like energetic, and somebody else is maybe more sensual. How do you help couples that are having sex or are willing to, but like can't seem to navigate the things that they're into? Because that's also a process of learning and trying and being like, no, I don't like that. Right? How do you help them communicate? What are kind of some of the tips that you give them to support their communication?
Yeah, a big part of that, I would say, is honesty, and being open and trusting your partner to express what it is that they want and need, and trusting them to kind of take care of themselves in a sense, because oftentimes we take on more responsibility than we need to. You mentioned rescuing before, and that is a very common pattern that gets in the way of relationships. So when one partner is taking on more responsibility than what they need to, I'm going to help them, I'm going to fix this, we're going to do the thing, and basically what that is, it's not trusting their partner to take care of themselves or to express what it is that they need or want. So that's a big part. Trusting yourself first to express what you need and want, and trusting your partner to express what it is that they need or want, and taking care of themselves. And negotiating those spaces where we're not quite aligning. What are we going to do? And I think that's a huge barrier, is first of all being able to express what you want. And accepting that, allowing it, and not having that shame, or there's something wrong with this, or I'm going to be judged for this. It's very vulnerable, for sure.
You just, all the pieces. So, first I have to acknowledge that I like something. Then, so this is one. And then there might be a lot of shame with that thing that I like.
Yes.
So then there's that process.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's actually saying it to the other person that might get very uncomfortable. Yes, easy. Just it's so funny how we think we're supposed to be able to just do this.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, there's so much to that. So
yes.
You said negotiating that. What might that look like? So let's say, I don't know, the man wants to have a threesome or something. The woman doesn't want to have a threesome. I can't tell you, I bring this up because this has come up a lot in different people I've talked to. Of like, well, I did this thing, or I was doing this thing and I didn't like it. Whether it was a threesome or whether it was not even in the sexual realm. They wanted me to do something, so I kept saying yes, and now it's 10 years later and I don't like this anymore. I'm not happy. How do you help people like navigate of, you said trusting the other person to know their limits. How do you create that space where there is, I don't know how to put this, so I'm trying to figure it out too, but relationships often end up in a bit of a hierarchy, right? There's often times where there's like a dominant, submissive to some degree, even if that moves around. How do you help people find like a playing field where they can negotiate?
You said the word curiosity before. Yeah, I think that's huge. When you are negotiating those spaces where you're not quite aligning, why? Answering the question why. Why are you afraid of this, or why is it uncomfortable? There's a lot of information in that. There can be truth, and where does that why come from? There's a lot of exploration that can happen in that, and I think those conversations, again, very vulnerable, but there can be release in that. First of all, in understanding for yourself, why is that uncomfortable for me, or why do I not want to go there? It's also going to bring up issues of trust. Why do I not trust this person to maybe explore that, or to get more curious about something. Curiosity. That's huge.
It is huge. And I imagine too with that, like, it's okay to screw up, like it's okay to make mistakes.
Yes.
And to go too far, do the thing. And then I was talking before about like the threesomes or the openness, and that's comes up in a lot of conversations I've had with people in like the tantric community. I've chatted with several women that, they wanted it to be open, so I went with it. But I never wanted it to be open. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh, it hurts my heart. And I'm like, I'm sorry. And I mean, I can go back in time and watch myself origami into who I thought what somebody wanted me to be. I've done it. How do you help, I would say particularly women on this one, because that's more my field. How do you help women acknowledge when it's okay that they need something different, or acknowledge and recognize that? How do you help them cultivate that? Because the other place I would say this is probably quite real is in like LGBTQ, anybody who has been raised in one system of thought around sexuality, even people who maybe are wanting polyamory, and not from a place of hiding, but from a place of like open expression. There's so many times we have a rigid case around how we think we're supposed to be. How do you help people acknowledge what they need and allow them to practice or play or bring it forward?
Yeah, and that comes down
Small questions.
No big deal. That comes down to trusting the self. And yeah, that's challenging for a lot of people. I think for women in particular, and especially if you're doing something that is against the norm, or is not part of how we're socialized or common culture, there can be a lot of shame around that. Or again, do I trust this, or we have nothing to reference it against, and so it comes down to I just really got to trust myself. So yeah, getting really present with self. Again, it's attending to the body and what is happening for me. Does this feel good? Does it not feel good? Why might it not be feeling good? And getting curious about that. Honest and curious about it.
Do you have suggestions for women who maybe are just learning how to even understand what they like and enjoy? Sometimes that's not always with a partner.
Yeah. Allowance. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And you can make mistakes. And you don't have to have an explanation for everything. Yeah. It is what it is. And I enjoyed this yesterday. Today I'm not enjoying it as much. There's so much complexity in what we're thinking and what we're feeling and our levels energetically. There's so much to consider. So it's really trusting what is happening right now in this moment.
Yeah, I love that. Again, it's so funny how simple this stuff is and not easy at all. It's so simple, and it's like we wouldn't have a job if it was easy. If you could offer a couple that wants to reconnect and maybe do practice, maybe a dyad, is there any other practices that you would offer that might be lovely for connecting into intimacy? So the dyad is a really beautiful space, eye gazing, speaking to what comes up. Is there any other practices that you would say are really lovely for connecting into intimacy?
Something that I highly recommend for couples, kind of a simple sort of practice, is using open-ended questions. And there's all kinds of resources like books and card sets and apps that have open-ended questions for couples. But it gets you talking about things that you don't normally talk about. And maybe learning something about yourself, learning something new about your partner. So just getting into that space of, again, it's coming to curiosity. What can I learn about myself? What can I learn about my partner? Because we can't know everything about ourselves. We can't know everything about our partner. So especially if you've been together for a long time, 10 plus years, there's an assumption that I already know everything I need to know about this person, or you take for granted that there is anything more to learn about this person. There's so much more that you can learn about a person. So having that space to get curious, ask questions, talk about things you don't normally talk about. Building that cognitive map of one another, again, is great for emotional connection. And the more emotionally connected you get, the more trust there is. And as there's more trust, you're going to open up about the things that are more vulnerable, or try to explore things that you're kind of curious about. Trust. Yeah. Anything that helps to build trust.
Beautiful. So dyading, just reflecting. Dyad, so space just to sit with each other, to sense each other, to be present, to say what comes up. Asking open-ended questions. And then I'm going to take it each one a little bit deeper into more physical connection. How might you, from that space, when you've had this space and you've connected, how might you move into touch? How might you get people to connect in touch?
Yeah, and that again is being really in the moment and trusting what you are experiencing. And some people, people have such different levels of trust or touch that they are comfortable with, and that can shift. And people have different levels of sensitivity. So again, it's communicating what is happening for you in the moment, and starting off gentle. So doing things slow, such as touching the hand, exploring different parts of the body. We get so caught up when it comes to sexual expression that it's all about the genitals and pleasure down there.
It's so not.
And there's so much more. There's so much sensuality and pleasure in other parts of the body. So it's exploring other areas. And again, if you can take climax off the table, let's take that whole production off the table, and we're just going to explore and enjoy our bodies, and explore different areas, doing different activities, trying different things with different areas of the body. So I have this matrix that I share with couples. So it has along the column is all these different body parts, and then along the rows are all these different activities, things that you could do with that body part, like all kinds of kinky, strange, and
tickle, pinch, slap, smack, lick.
Yes, all of the things. Vomit, like anything.
Oh dear. Oh my.
You never know what somebody's yum is. But yeah, it'll get you.
Okay, I'm pausing you. You never know. You never know what somebody's yum is. Thank you for
Curiosity again, and you might not know what your own yum is. So again, it's about being curious and exploring something. So this matrix gets couples to explore different parts of their body, like, for example, the knee. Like, I really like an ice cube on the kneecap. Like, I don't know.
Who'd have thunk?
Yeah. So getting curious about it, trying different things. So thinking of the body as kind of like a playground. How does my body function? And trusting what your body is telling you. What areas feel good today? What doesn't? What sort of touch feels good? What doesn't?
I love that.
Curiosity.
Exploring. I love that. I really love the map too, and this idea of like hands. Just a hand.
Yes.
I remember a couple of years ago I was working with a woman who is a tantra facilitator, and we were talking about the wheel of consent and about like this idea of giving and receiving and play, and we were working together, and it was like, I'm naturally good at, like, I like giving. I tune in, right? And so she's like, oh, give me a massage, and she asks for what she wants, and then she's like, now you get to take my hand and do anything you want to it. And we just worked hands. And I'm like this, I'm like, because I am a 4-year-old. And I was like, this is fun. But it's like, it doesn't even have to be sexual. It might be that just you want to see what something's like or what it feels like because you're curious. It's and then all of a sudden, no different than a voice, right? Where we have, and we have, hey, and we have all these places. Now all of a sudden, our sense of intimacy can have play and silliness and knowing where the edges are, knowing how to play on those edges and how to back off of them. And so something like that, like a little map, is such a beautiful way to bring awareness to a bunch of things you never thought about before. I love that.
Yes. I like that word play. Playful.
It's so, we talked about in the program, but we learn through play. Our social engagement system goes on, we play, we try things out, we test things. It's a fun thing, and yet we get older and we're like, play is bad, I need to be productive. And it's like, play is one of the most productive ways of learning. But because it doesn't feel like we're working, we feel like we've lost something.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm so glad that you were here and that we got to have this conversation.
Yay.
Yeah. Is there anything that you'd like to share before we close it out for the day?
I've said a lot of things.
Good.
Trust, play, pleasure, curiosity. Yeah.
That's really it. And space.
Space.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So much. It was so lovely. I'm so glad you were here. We got
Yay.
to do this. As I said, Shari is a registered psychologist and sexologist in Calgary. She is currently taking clients, and her information is here as well, so you can definitely check her out if you want more information. And let's be real, if someday you're going along and you're like, Amy talked to that sexologist person, I wish, just message me and then I'll give you the information. Yeah, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.